In today's Leeds news, standout stats from yesterday, the latest on Danilo Doekhi's move and interest, this weekend's loan watch, Dennis Wise Leeds regrets, and Leeds want to add one or two more. Morning folks, welcome to the Leeds View Monday morning, the 12th of January with your Leeds United news. Hope you're all having a pretty good week so far, or it's Monday. I hope you had a great weekend, and it's always made a little bit easier when Leeds United do get a positive result. A really good comeback yesterday in the FA Cup. Just to clarify a bit on the instant match reaction, which is available on the channel, the ratings that are on the screen during that are all pulled directly from SofaScore. They're not my ratings. If you want my ratings, you can check them out on the Leeds View Instagram page, where the Finalysis ratings will be, along with some quotes from the manager, as well as Man of the Match awards that are given out with the Finalysis group. Also, congratulations to James Justin on his first goal for Leeds United. And the FA Cup draw takes place tonight. We will have a watch along and a reaction over on bigup.com, myself and Andrew Stats Dalton, at 6 p.m. tonight if you want to check that out. But let's crack on and get stuck into the news, and we'll start off with some standout stats from yesterday's game. As always, thank you to LUFC Data, Andrew Stats Dalton and Johnny Cooper for these stats. We'll start off with Daniel Farke, and he becomes the first Leeds United manager or head coach to win 4 FA Cup matches since David O'Leary did it with 5. Farke has beaten Derby, Harrogate, Plymouth and Peterborough now. Leeds secured the club's first comeback win in the FA Cup since the 2-1 victory over Cambridge United at the Abbey Stadium in January 2017 under Gary Monk. James Justin is the first right back to score in the FA Cup for Leeds United since Gary Kelly's strike against Wigan 20 years ago. Prior to that, it was Mel Sterland against Barnsley in 1991. Gaetano Berardi did score for Leeds since then, but he was playing centre-half when he scored against Newport County. Tanaka made the most touches with 94, successful forward passes with 35, and outfield ball recoveries with 10 of any player involved at Pride Park, and became the first Asian player to score for Leeds United in the FA Cup. And there's only been 2 occasions where a Leeds player has been unsuccessful with 10 plus crosses in a match this season. Jack Harrison against Sheffield Wednesday in August with 14, and Jack Harrison again yesterday against Derby County with 10. Let's move on. The most solid and credible Leeds link to date in the January transfer window has been Union Berlin centre-back Danilo Doekhi. And with an adductor injury picked up yesterday by Sebastian Barnau, Leeds United would likely be looking at this as a piece of business they would like to get done. But there have been reports over the weekend on this, which means it may not happen, or at least it may not happen in January, depending on who you want to believe. Over the weekend, Team Talk put a report out that stated that Aston Villa were now also interested, along with Leeds United, in the Union Berlin centre-back, and they want a fee of around €13 million, so about £11 million if a deal is to be done now. If Aston Villa were likely to pay that fee, it would probably rule Leeds United out that at this point. However, the saving grace on this is the report does come from Team Talk, so you can take that with a pinch of salt. Doesn't have a huge amount of credibility. However, another report that did come out over the course of the weekend has far more credibility, and this one comes from Sky Germany's Florian Plettenberg, who seems to confirm Leeds United's interest in the centre-back, but not necessarily in January. Plettenberg says that Leeds are very keen on bringing Doekhi into the club, but would prefer to try and sign a pre-contract agreement with the player this month and bring him to Elland Road on a free transfer in the summer, which does make financial sense from a Leeds perspective. You don't want to pay a huge fee for a player who has 6 months left on his contract. But if there are other clubs that are interested in Doekhi, then this approach and this course of action might backfire on Leeds United and may mean Leeds will need to go between now and the end of the season without reinforcements in that position, if that is, as I say, to be believed. However, Plettenberg has more to add to that, and he tweeted this. Daniel Farke is keen to bring Danilo Doekhi to Leeds United, ideally on a free transfer no later than the summer. LUFC are one of several clubs interested in the 27-year-old centre-back. As revealed, Doekhi intends to leave Union Berlin at the latest summer 2026 when his contract expires. A move in January is not ruled out. If Union are aware of this, which they very likely are, that the player is planning on winding his contract down, they might force his hand and try and get a sale in January to get some money in. And if Leeds are interested in it, the report last week stated that Leeds United were playing the waiting game in an attempt to get Union Berlin's transfer requirements down a little bit and try and get a deal done. That, as we said during last week, that approach backfired on Leeds during the summer a couple of times. But other reports over the weekend said that it's pretty quiet around Leeds United when it comes to transfers. There may be a couple in the works, but nothing imminent. And Daniel Farke also confirmed over the course of the weekend that there is no transfers imminent. When he was asked, though, about the addition of a new centre-back because of Sebastian Bornau's adductor injury, Farke said this: "It's always good to have options. Stroke and Byram can play there. Bornau was playing more like a right-back, and we already thought that I would bring in a right-back at half-time." So Farke has confirmed over the last couple of weeks that he would like a couple of additions. There's more detail on that towards the back end of today's news, but let's move on. We'll get into this weekend's loan watch. We'll start off with Largi Ramazani, who was on the bench again for Valencia but came on in the second half on the 77th minute. Had a decent game when he came on, was looking lively and getting back to his best. Max Verber, guess what, is out injured again, and there are talks in Germany that Verber's loan could be cancelled and we could see him back at Leeds before the end of this month. Isaac Schmidt plays tomorrow night for Werder Bremen against Dortmund. Rory Mahadi, unfortunately, no game this weekend. Another one postponed due to weather in the FA Trophy this time. Joe Gelhardt is still currently out injured and missed out on Hull's FA Cup penalty win over Blackburn Rovers. Connor Douglas started for Buxton in their 2-1 National League North win over Oxford away. He played 73 minutes and a decent performance there as well. Mateo Joseph was on the bench for Mallorca's 2-1 away loss to Vallecano. He came on in the 59th minute. No real goal involvement or impact in that game for Mateo Joseph. He's not getting goals or assists at the moment, but he is alternating between starts and bench appearances for Mallorca. He's been playing as a right-sided player an awful lot in their system, so probably goals aren't exactly what he's looking for, but you would imagine a couple of assists at this point as well. No talk about any cancellations of his loan. He seems to be very much involved in Real Mallorca's plans right now. Let's move on. Let's talk about Dennis Wise. Dennis Wise is not what you'd call a popular figure around Leeds United, but he was part of the recovery from the minus 15 points in the League One season alongside Gustavo Poyet. Wise managed Leeds United for a short period of time before moving on to an executive role at Newcastle, and he has now been talking about his time at Leeds United and says he does have regrets about his exit from the club. Wise wasn't a popular choice when he was appointed as the Leeds United manager by then chairman Ken Bates, who wasn't very popular either, and nobody would be surprised by any decisions that Ken Bates made. But Wise believes that it was done to take pressure off of Ken and put it very much on Dennis Wise's shoulders. And speaking about his appointment at Leeds United, Dennis Wise said this: "He decided to appoint me as a Leeds manager, maybe because he needed someone who was more hated than him. The rivalry between Chelsea and Leeds has been fierce ever since the great teams of the 1960s and 70s, and with my Chelsea background, it probably took pressure off Ken a bit and put it on me." Wise went on to talk about the issues that the side had that season, not just with the minus 15 points, but also the wage bill, which Wise claimed was in and around £14.4 million at that time, and he needed to get it down to £4 million, which he did do, but said there was no money available for transfers. But speaking on his exit from Leeds and his appointment as an executive at Newcastle, Wise said the following: "We won our first 7 games to quickly close the gap, and by the turn of the year, we were in the top 3. When a fee was paid for me to go to Newcastle as an executive role, that was a big mistake on my part. I should have continued on and finished what I started at Leeds. I don't have many regrets, but I do have disappointments, and that was one of them." Gus Poyet had left Leeds United just before Dennis Wise, and they were definitely better as a pair results-wise than they were with Dennis Wise on his own. But nobody's going to lose any sleep or have much sympathy for Dennis Wise. And there's somebody right now frantically typing in the comments, "I don't care about Dennis Wise," but we are a Leeds United news channel, and this is a story about Leeds United, so we were always going to cover it. So there you go. Let's move on. Let's talk about where Leeds sit with their transfer policy now that we're heading into the third week of the transfer window. Daniel Farke has given some indications over the last couple of weeks that he would like to add a few additions to the Leeds United squad, but doesn't want to see any exits, at least at this point. Joel Piru spoke last week about potentially moving on from Leeds United, and he said he has no interest in moving on in January, but might review his situation come the summer. Farke does want a couple of additions to the Leeds United squad, and with the injury to Sebastian Bornau, Leeds will need to get some business done after the Derby County game, when Daniel Farke did say he would start to talk about Leeds transfer activity. So where does that leave Leeds right now? Well, the Yorkshire Evening Post's Graham Smith has been speaking about this, and he said that Leeds United are aiming to add 1 or 2 additions to the squad this month. Leeds' current run means it is a little bit easier to try and attract some talent to the squad, and the ownership definitely shouldn't be resting on their laurels or sitting on their hands and assuming that the job is done right now to stay in the Premier League. A few bad results and that could turn around very, very quickly. But speaking on the Inside Elland Road podcast this week, Graham Smith said the following on Leeds' potential transfer dealings. The way it's been described to me is that work is ongoing. There are some slow burning options that they're looking at. And the thinking at Leeds is still 1 or 2 options. And I think is what they are aiming for. Daniel Farke, as I say, will want defensive cover, but he might still want to get the attacking players in that he didn't get during the summer transfer window. He wanted a left-footed right-sided player, and he wanted an attacking 10 as well. There was also talk of a striker at that point, but Leeds have said over the last couple of weeks they won't be spending tens of millions of pounds on anybody, and from a PSR perspective they can spend the money now as long as they bring in that money again before the 30th of June PSR window. It's an important transfer window for Leeds United to do something and not to rest on their laurels and try and give Daniel Farke a little bit more depth in certain positions or options to change his approach to games. The teams down around Leeds have already started to make their additions, so they're getting stronger. Leeds United will need to make sure that they also have everything they need to survive in the second half of the Premier League. It's been a good run so far, but as we know, the Premier League is pretty brutal and they can turn around very quickly if you get too complacent or too comfortable. So work to do for Leeds, an important run of games coming up with Fulham next weekend as one of the ones Leeds should be eyeballing as a potential 3 points. Folks, that'll be it for me today. More news tomorrow and the podcast over on Big Up at 6 p.m. tonight to have a reaction to the FA Cup 6th round draw. You can join me and Andrew Stats Dalton there if you want to. If you want to stick a like on the video or a hype on your way out the door, that would be appreciated. I will talk to you soon. See you later. Bye.